we mentioned. Okay, let me stop sharing my screen for now. And as I mentioned earlier, the topic for today's shir is based on the beginning of this week's parsha. The beginning of this week's parsha is Balotcha Tanerot, that we concerning the menorah, and I wanted to talk about what is the shape of the menorah, right? The menorah and the Beit HaMikdash. What did it look like? There's what to talk about in terms of the base and the etc. But primarily, I want to talk about the shape of the branches of the candelabra of the menorah. Specifically, were they rounded or were they straight? If anyone's ever seen a Chabad menorah parade or any public Chabad menorahs, you'll see that Chabad is adamant that all of their Hanukkah menorahs are triangles, right? They're all angles. They're all straight arms, as opposed to what many of us may have as our menorah Chanukiahs at home, or what we think about when we think about the menorah outside the Knesset, right? Which is based on the menorah depicted in the Arch of Titus, which is rounded arms. So I want to spend a few minutes talking about that. And it touches on something we had touched on before. I actually have a whole separate share. Maybe one of these weeks we'll do it. That has to do with archaeology. In other words, let's say you find, let's say we find a pair of tefillin from the Jews in the Midbar, and we find that the order of the tefillin is like Rabbeinu Tam and not like Rashi. Would that impact the way we conduct ourselves or not? I won't answer that question now, but it leads into the question here. Again, this is not a halachic question because we don't have a menorah, right? The menorah of the Mishkan or the Mikdash doesn't exist. We look forward to that being rebuilt speedily in our days. However, it should be noted that anyone who's been in the Jewish quarter, right, in the Rova, up the stairs from the Kotel, the Machona Mikdash, right, the Temple Institute has commissioned a wax depiction of the menorah. I don't think it's gold yet. I don't think they spent the money to make it gold, but it's all set up, and it's the more familiar curved branches of the menorah that they created. I'm glad they didn't commit it to gold yet, but where does this come from? This discussion, this difference of opinion. That's what I wanted to talk about this afternoon. So first, it should be noted that the exact shape of the Mishkan, the menorah in the Mishkan or the Beit HaMikdash, is not mentioned anywhere in Tanakh, right? It's not mentioned specifically in the words of the Psukim, neither here nor in Shemot, where it's first mentioned in Truma. But and it's not really it's not mentioned explicitly in the Talmud either. Although there is perhaps a proof. There's supporting evidence from one Gemara, but not conclusive. We'll see in a moment. This becomes more of a debate among the Rishonim. The Rishonim on the Psukim in Truma and elsewhere in Shemot, where it describes the construction of the Mishkan and the menorah, as well as in halachic text thereafter, beginning with the Middle Ages. So the Ibn Ezra, on his commentary in Shemot, chapter 25, suggests that the branches were half circles. Rashi, here maybe I'll pull up Rashi because we were on Safaria already, so I can pull that up for us relatively quickly. Let's see if we have Tanakh. Now we're just going to scroll down for a second to commentary. Rashi, good old Rashi. Rashi on Shemot, chapter 25. Oh, whoops. Chapter 12, way down. Chapter 25. Oh, it gives you each verse. Where are we? 25, 32. Here we go. Yotzim mitzideha, the 6 branches shall go out of its side. So here's Rashi, we'll read in English. On each side, slantwise, extending on high, up to the level of the candlestick proper, of the middle branch. They came out from the middle branch, one above the other, the lowest being the longest, that above it being shorter than it, and the upper one even shorter than that. For the height of their tops was to be the same as the height of the middle branch, the 7th, the central one, from which the other 6 branches came out, right? So you have one branch in the middle, right? And each of the other branches coming out on each side slantwise. Ba'alach zone, that's the key word right there. Ba'alach zone. Said it seems clear, or is it? But the most simple reading of that is slantwise. Right? How do you make a slant? You make a slant by being straight, right? So that seems clear. Now, some suggest that alach zone is not as clear as we want to say. Maybe alach zone means that that it was a diagonal curve. In other words, if you think about it, you can have more circular curves as opposed to more diagonal curves, right? You think about most depictions of our menorah, the curves are more diagonal as they come out, even if they're curved. So maybe that's what Rashi means. Again, it's a little bit of a stretch, but some want to suggest that alach zone just means that they're not perfectly circular. They're not perfect half circles in terms of what the menorah looked like, but they came out on a slant, and that was a little bit more, it spread out a little bit more. That might be a forced reading, but one that some want to suggest. The son of the Rambam, Avram ben Rambam, wrote a commentary on Chumash, and on that pasuk makes it clear without any ambiguity that he believes that the branches were straight on angles, slants coming out of the middle branch, and what we'll see in a moment is he says that this was the opinion of his father. And the question is that true? Can we support that in any way? Lastly, the archaeological evidence. Many, if not most, of the depictions of candelabras from that period and before are curved, which begs the question. So which one was it? What did the menorah in the Mishkan and the Beit HaMikdash look like? Again, with that piece of information, the most candelabras from that period are depicted in the archaeological finds as curved. So that means one of two things: either the menorah in the Mishkan and the Beit HaMikdash was curved, or the menorah in the Mishkan and the Beit HaMikdash was unique in that it wasn't curved, but all the other candelabras of the time were in fact curved. Which one is more compelling? I'll ask you. I think both are interestingly compelling. What about the Rambam's position? We said that Avram ben Rambam, in his commentary on Shemot chapter 25, tells us that the opinion of my father is that they were slants, straight, coming out of the center, like triangles. So the Rambam's position is a matter of dispute. In his halachic work, the Rambam leaves out that word alach zone. I remember that word that seemed to indicate that the angles were straight, right? The alach zone over there. The Rambam doesn't have that word. The Rambam leaves the word alach zone out, which seems to imply, which again, what can you learn? What can you prove based on an omission? Well, he doesn't make it as clear for us in terms of his understanding of what it looks like. And then we come to the Oxford manuscript. I think I actually saw this on display at the Metropolitan Museum of Art when there was a Judaica collection there a few years ago. I believe the Oxford manuscript of the Rambam's Parasha Mishnah was on display. It's believed to be in the Rambam's handwriting, his own handwriting. It was purchased by by Oxford University in 1693, and it was cataloged in 1886. That might become important in a moment as we further delve into this, right? So, and what do we find in this manuscript? There is a drawing that he does of the menorah, and that picture has straight branches, right? So that seems pretty clear, and the Rambam's son said that's what my father holds. Now again, it's not conclusive because what you see from that picture, and I wish I had saved it, but you can look it up on your own. It's available online on the internet in a number of places, is that it's clear that the Rambam's purpose of making that diagram is to show you how all of the embellishments, all of the bells and cups and flowers that are described in the Torah were arranged on the branches. And obviously that's easier to do by making the branches straight as opposed to trying to draw it and depict it on a curved branch. Now, so you could argue that the Rambam drew that menorah just as a, not for the purposes of telling us what the menorah looked like, but for the purposes of telling us what the pictures on the menorah look like. But again, maybe that's not a conclusive proof, but that coupled with the fact that the Rambam's son tells us that they were at angles, they were triangles, seems to be an interesting combination. Here's another piece of the puzzle, right? Nothing's conclusive, but we have these pieces of the puzzle. Another piece of the puzzle is in the Gemara Menachot, page 28b, and the question is, can the menorah be made out of wood? Now, again, why do they ask this question? Well, it could have been just hypothetical, but it was more than that. In the aftermath of the Maccabee victory over the Syrian Greeks, we know that the story is that the Chashmonaim couldn't find pure olive oil. That's what we're told in the text of our Al-Anisim, etc. But you know what else they couldn't find? They couldn't find the menorah. And so there's a whole question about what exactly did they use for a menorah until they got the resources together to build a golden menorah again. So the Gemara Menachot asks, can the menorah be made out of wood? And it's a difference of opinion. We don't have to go into that Gemara in detail. But one opinion is that even according to the opinion that holds that you can make the menorah out of wood, it's really not made out of wood. What it's really made out of is iron spits covered in tin. And some of the commentators explain that the tin was colored to look like wood, or that's what tin looks like. I don't really know what tin looks like. And that's what they used as a menorah. So again, it was iron spits, shipudim, that were covered in tin, were used as the makeshift menorah until they were able to afford a silver menorah, and then finally they were able to replace the golden menorah. Shipudim, iron spits, right? Iron rods. What do iron spits look like? They're right. Think about like a rotisserie. They're straight. How do you make a menorah out of straight iron shipudim? The only way you can make that menorah is putting two together on angles and get the right ones, and you have 7 coming out of the center, like the Chabad menorah. So what do we see from here? That it seems that the Chashmonaim menorah that was not made out of gold was instead made out of some other metals, iron and tin, and had straight branches. Does that tell us that that's what was that allowed because that's exactly what the golden menorah ideally in the Beit HaMikdash looked like in the Mishkan? Or is that just permissible but not what the actual menorah looked like? Again, either way, but more evidence leading towards the possibility that straight, I keep using my hands today, straight branches were more authentic. Now there are 2 17th century rabbis who reiterate the position of the Ibn Ezra and say that the branches were curved. One is wrote a book, Chakod HaMishkan, Chukod HaMishkan, Rav Yosef Shalit Ben Azar Riket. The other one wrote the Sefer Maaseh Choshev, Rav Emmanuel Ricci. And their proof, like I mentioned before, is the fact that the Rambam does not include the word alachzon, angles, in his description of the menorah. And so again, the explicit support for rounded menorah, at least in rabbinic text, is not until the 17th century. What we also saw is that these two rabbis of the 17th century most probably, almost definitely, did not have access to the Rambam's manuscript, which was in Oxford. Jews were not allowed in Oxford until after their deaths. And the collection, including the Rambam's handwritten diagram, wasn't cataloged until well after their death, the late 19th century. So again, how much weight do we put from the absence of the word alachzon versus the Rambam's own son testifying that his father felt that it was on an angle? They were straight, the branches, and the diagram that the Rambam has in that manuscript. So, so it seems there's a lot of support to the idea of straight branches of the menorah. We'll end with the Arch of Titus. We know that the Arch of Titus, constructed in 81 CE, shortly after the death of Titus by his brother, as a homage, as an honor to his father and Domitian, I think his name was, who created it, the next emperor of Rome, Vespasian's other son and Titus's brother, as a tribute to him. And this became the site. Pope Paul IV made the Arch of Titus the site of a yearly oath that the popes and the Romans required the Jews of the Roman Jewish community to take an oath of submission. In other words, the Arch of Titus represented the fall of the Second Jewish Commonwealth. It represented the end of Jewish sovereignty in the land of Israel. It, as Rav Soloveitchik discusses, we talk about in Tisha B'Av, from Christian theological perspective, it proved that Judaism was wrong, the Torah had been replaced by Christianity, and that the Jews were no longer important members of the world stage. They had been delegated to the trash heap of history. And part of that was every year the Pope, beginning with Pope Paul IV, the Jews were forced to stand under the Arch of Titus and take an oath of submission, proving that they were no longer relevant on the stage of history. Now we know that the menorah on the Arch of Titus has circular branches. And that is, in fact, the Arch of Titus is the exact source for the depiction of the very large menorah that stands outside the Knesset grounds, and the basis of many other menorah depictions over the last almost 2,000 years. So what about the Arch of Titus? So the Lubavitcher Rebbe, who made this a strong point, was adamant that the Arch of Titus is no proof as to what the Mishkan's menorah look like. Number one, he points out that the menorah on the Arch of Titus is not, we know that it's not a precise replica of the menorah that we know about in the Mishkan and the Mikdash, because, for instance, the base is wrong. Many talk about how almost everyone, even those who say that the branches of the menorah are accurate in the Arch of Titus, admit that the base upon which this menorah is sitting is not the authentic original base. It doesn't have, for example, it doesn't have feet. There were feet that extended off the bottom of the base, and that is not seen in the depiction found on the Arch of Titus. Another thing that we see is that even furthermore, so one could say that the actual menorah, the top part, was authentic, original, and it was put in a different base as it made its way to Rome. Another problem is that on the shaft itself of the menorah, depicted by the Arch of Titus, you can see a sea dragon. That already becomes problematic, because sea dragons are Roman gods, right? Now, you can answer this in a couple of different ways. You can say that it was that the branches of the menorah are correct, right? They were rounded. But the embellishments that the sculptor, that the artist made were to Romanize them. But how far did they go to Romanize them? That's the Rebbe said. The Rebbe felt strongly that they Romanized the entire thing. The base is wrong, the shaft is wrong, the curvature of the branches is wrong. Other academics wouldn't go that far. However, it seems that it's clear that the exact depiction of the menorah on the Arch of Titus is not the exact replica, copy of the menorah that was in the Mishkan or the Beit HaMikdash. And the question is, how far off is it? Is it just the base that's off? Is it just the sea dragon that was added to make it more Roman? Is the whole thing wrong? And just the depiction of a typical candelabra. We know that the typical candelabras were curved. I mentioned that already. The question is, did the menorah in the Beit HaMikdash follow the typical design, or was it specifically something that looked very different? So the Rebbe felt very strongly you can't rely on the Arch of Titus to tell us what the shape of the menorah branches look like. Also, he suggests, even if you want to say that there's a Jewish source to the depiction on the Arch of Titus, we know that King Shlomo, when he built the Beit HaMikdash, built 10 candelabras in addition to the menorah. Is it possible that this is one of those 10 candelabras, and that the candelabras didn't look exactly or at all like the actual menorah, that the menorah had straight branches, whereas Shlomo's candelabras have curved branches? Many understand that Shlomo made 10 replicas of the kalim of the Mishkan, of the Mikdash. So that would be a problem to what the Rebbe is suggesting. But it's certainly within the realm of possibility. So therefore, according to the Lubavitcher Rebbe, the rounded menorah that is depicted in the Arch of Titus is incorrect. It's not the menorah. It may have been a candelabra. It may have even been a Jewish candelabra. It may have even been Shlomo's candelabra that was in the vicinity of the Mikdash. However, it was not the menorah that was used as a fulfillment of the daily service in the Beit HaMikdash. Now, we could question each of these proofs. And again, we saw from Rashi and the Rambam's drawing and the Rambam's son that there's a lot of proof. But the Rebbe's reasoning was beyond the specific proofs that we brought. And his reasoning was because what does the Arch of Titus represent? The Arch of Titus represents the defeat of the Jewish people. Jews leaving their homeland, being subjected to an exile that continues to this day. It represents the defeat of Bnei Israel and the conquest of the Romans over God's chosen people, right? A defeat of the Jewish people. The Jewish people's defeat is, in a sense, kav yachol, as you might say, a defeat of the Almighty himself. And certainly the exile that accompanied it brought a period of darkness and disconnect between ourselves and Avinu Shebashamayim and Hashem. So from that perspective, the Rebbe was very adamant that our menorah should not be based on a model that is found that symbolizes such a distance and such distraught and depressing ideas. And in fact, we know that the menorah, as it stood in the Beit HaMikdash, was actually symbolized the exact opposite of what the Arch of Titus represented. It represented God's presence in the world. It represented the illumination of our minds, the rekindling of our souls, right? A deep, burning, passionate connection with an awareness of God, right? The Arch of Titus represents the exact opposite. So we can understand why the Rebbe was insistent that the symbol of the menorah for all time should not be the symbol of the one that's on the Arch of Titus, because it represents something completely different. And therefore, his Hasidim to this day are adamant that the menorah should have straight branches. Even the Chanukiah, again, the Chanukiah is not the same as the menorah. So really, ours are 9 branches. So that's not obviously the menorah in the Beit HaMikdash was 7 branch. Nonetheless, being that it represents the miracle of the oil that happened through the menorah. And as we mentioned in the Gemara Menachot, part of that miracle was establishing a menorah itself. Not only did they not know where the oil was, they didn't have a menorah, so they had to make one then. That being the case, we can understand why we want to make a connection between the menorahs in the Mikdash and the Chanukias that we use. And we at least hopefully from this year, we begin to understand why there was, certainly the Rebbe was insistent. Yes, there is some evidence based on Rashi, based on the Rambam, etc. The evidence supporting rounded, curved branches seems to be a little less authoritative, even though the archaeological evidence seems to be stronger. So, there's a bit of a toss-up, but certainly the message, the symbolism of the menorah as depicted on the Arch of Titus stands in direct contrast, in contradistinction to the message of the menorah that stood in the Mikdash. Just to repeat, the message of the Mikdash menorah was that God is here, God is part of our lives, God wants what's best for us. Hopefully, He allows us to be illuminated so that we see that, and that we feel that, just like we can see fire and feel the warmth of fire. So too, we should see God in our lives and feel God's presence in our lives as well. Wishing everyone a Shabbat Shalom. We'll have a truncated lunch and learn tomorrow, but we will meet tomorrow at noon. Have a very wonderful Thursday afternoon. Take care. Bye-bye.